All right, today we have another episode from the archives with one of my incredible guests. Enjoy. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast, a show about the incredible people dedicated to helping those who've experienced trauma. My name is Guy McPherson, and my mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to inspire each of us to help those around us. All right, guys, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Today, some very special guests here, Josh Aronson and Julie Sayres. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Nice. All right. Thanks. So Josh Aronson has been producing and directing documentary films since 2000. He was nominated for an Oscar for his film Sound and Fury and has made award-winning films on disability, the search for identity, classical music, and history. His latest film, which we're here to talk about today, is the recently released To Be of Service, about veterans with PTSD and their service dogs. My second guest, Julie Sayres, is an award-winning screenwriter working in Los Angeles, whose credits include the film Reaching for the Moon, for which she won the Best Adapted Screenplay Award by the Brazilian Academy of Letters. She was also nominated for the Best Adapted Screenplay by the Brazilian Academy of Cinema. Julie has also co-creator and supervising producer of the CBS one-hour drama Four Corners. She's also written many movies for television, including A Walton Easter, Dallas Reunion, and the miniseries Knots Landing. She currently has 2 feature films in development, one in the U.S. and the other is in Brazil. All right, folks, again, welcome. Thanks again for taking the time to do this.
Super pleasure.
This film, I just want to share a little bit about my initial hit on this film. This was so moving. It was really, just want to share with the audience, I was telling both Julie and Josh that I watched this movie last night and it really was moving. I mean, I was at times like tearing up. I was frustrated and pissed off. You managed to not just talk about the service dogs, but really, I think, provide a detailed, sensitive glimpse into what people with PTSD are experiencing.
Well, thank you.
I don't think that's an easy task to do. It was no joke. I mean, there were times when a lot of the people who you featured in the movie shared some stuff that was really hard to hear.
Yeah.
And the way it works, the way the film works, I think people need to watch this film in short. So we'll get into more of it. But anyway, congrats on this. Very powerful.
Thank you.
So let's start with you, Josh. Let's talk a little bit about what brought you to this film, why you wanted to do it in the first place, and let's talk more about the film. So why don't you start?
Okay. Well, Julie brought me the idea for the film some 5-6 years ago. And the idea simply being to make a film about how service dogs, as a modality of healing treatment, works so well for veterans with PTSD. And at the time, I was in a place that I wasn't prepared to dive into the world of trauma and vets, and it didn't grab me. And I've gotten to a place in my career and in my life where I only do deep dive films like this when they completely and utterly grab me because of what it takes to do them. But Julie being Julie, and to my honor, I must say, she came back 2 years later. And she said, you really should look at this film again. This is a really important document. And Julie, who had been, I don't mean to speak for Julie, but she'd been living in this world for a long time because she teaches in California. She has a writing class for veterans and came across a lot of veterans with PTSD and heard about dogs. And she is a dog lover of the highest order, as one can only say. So it was of the cloth for her. And she came back, and I had changed where I was in my life a bit, which is to say that I really had come to terms with some trauma that happened to me. And so I was ready to tell a story about trauma. The timing was right for me. And we really connected, creatively on what the film was going to be. And I decided to dive in. And it took us 2.5 years of real engaged work. And we made the film. And she and I produced the film together, and I directed it.
Julie, share how you came to this.
Well, as Josh said, I've always been a dog fanatic. I'm on my third German Shepherd, and that's one of my great loves. And the idea of trauma has always interested me for various personal reasons. And then I wrote a pilot about a veteran, a TV pilot about a veteran with PTSD and a service dog. While I was doing research for that pilot, I met some of the trainers and providers of service dogs and was deeply moved by their work and by some of the veterans that I met through those people. At the same time, I was working in a program or volunteering in a program at the Writers Guild Foundation, teaching veterans how to write for the screen. And I met so many veterans, and got to know them well and got to know their stories through their screenplays and teleplays. And to me, it was a topic that combined so many of the things that were meaningful to me: dogs, trauma. One of the things that's really important to Josh as well is, to me, moral cost of war and what we're doing to young people by sending them away. So what do you do with them when they come back? It was, they give their all when they go overseas, when they deploy. They come back broken. And what? Medication? There's got to be another way. So all of those factors brought me to this idea. And I can't imagine anybody better than Josh to carry it all.
You both mentioned reasons why, Josh, in your case, there was some hesitancy in the beginning about getting into this, and there were personal reasons and kind of connections to trauma. Obviously, you don't have to share anything you don't want to, but I'm interested in if you would be sharing what that was for you, Josh.
Yeah, I will. But in telling you what it is, let me say why it was important to me. Because I think films of this nature are best when they can be universal stories, when people can connect with the stories on many, many levels. And it's my belief that everyone has experienced trauma at some level in their lives. And the story of our lives, each of us in our own way, is coming to terms with that trauma and finding a healing modality that works for you so that you can function at the best level that you can and be your best self. That for some people, that means just staying alive. It means, being able to function and not committing suicide. To some people, it means you can run a corporation. But nevertheless, dealing with your trauma so that you can function is a necessary part of life. And the trauma can be bullying in a high school playground. The trauma can be rape. The trauma can be combat trauma, TBI, traumatic brain injury. The trauma can be, and in my case, it sounds innocuous enough compared to the major traumas we covered in the film, but the trauma just of growing up in my household with a woman who was not a happy woman. And so it was a traumatic situation for three boys. I have two brothers. And we've come to realize through therapy that we were traumatized for some years in our childhood. And overcoming the trauma in our case was a lot of therapy, a lot of work, a lot of personality work, a lot of relationship work. And it took work to be able to function at the level that I am now. And I couldn't have done a film about trauma until I came to understand that. So it was just part of the background for me. And it's what I hope makes the film in some ways universal, that people will connect on that level.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. And, on this podcast, we talk a lot about what trauma is and how it's not just PTSD. A lot of people think, combat trauma when they think about trauma and PTSD, but we certainly talk a lot about that. And in my case, it was bullying and how it just affected the trajectory of my life. But again, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Julie, how about you? What was your... If you want to share.
I don't want to share specifics. It's a family issue. I'm the daughter of a psychoanalyst, so, yes, I know. You're sorry for me. I know everybody says the same thing. But I was sort of raised to look at problems and trauma and whatever issue it is in a more, I guess, profound way, a more psychological way, a deeper way. And I was always a very sensitive kid to everything. That's a blessing and a curse. It's great when you're a screenwriter, but it's also hard if you're a person. Mm-hmm. And so some things happened in my family later on in life that were very traumatic. And I've always been connected to people who are in trouble. It's something that draws me in because I want to help. It's just how I was raised or how I am. And so this issue of PTSD and returning soldiers who really need help it was very compelling to me. And then when you throw dogs into the mix, can't go wrong. So that was my, I don't really want to go into specifics.
And you don't, there's no need to, but again, thank you for sharing that. The people you feature in this film, the dogs you feature in this film. I mean, my God, these dogs you just want to reach into the screen and like grab these dogs. They're amazing. And there was at one point when I think it might've been one of the trainers talking about, the different commands, the many commands, but it's the relationship that is so powerful. And when I heard that, I thought to myself, my God, that's so much of what we talk about on this podcast. There are so many different modalities, but yet it is a relationship between a therapist and a client. And again, the people, the veterans that you focused on, featured, the way this film reveals what's going on for them. Again, it's heart-wrenching, but it's so human. I mean, you can talk about trauma and you can talk about PTSD, but watching these people in this film, it's so crazy to see what these people are going through on a daily basis.
We interviewed a lot of veterans, and obviously we had to narrow it down to a small number of people for the film, and we found them to be the most compelling. But every one of them had a story that could break your heart. So if you multiply the number of veterans in our film by thousands, you can only imagine how many people are suffering after being deployed.
Julie, hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands, yes. I'm bad at math.
No, but there's 500,000 veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan that have come back with PTSD. 15 to 20% of the returning vets have PTSD. So it's an enormous problem. And the other thing that's interesting is a lot of people, Guy, have said what you said, which is the film shows PTSD for what it is, the experience of PTSD. The goal was to really show it in a visceral way, in all of its pain, in all of its loneliness, and all of its agony, sheer agony. And we tried to do that because it seemed that people didn't really understand it. People didn't really get what PTSD was. We all know post-traumatic stress disorder. You come back as a result of some trauma that you experienced in war, and you have PTSD. And we've seen images of, homeless veterans, mostly images of Vietnam vets, who are homeless. And there's sort of generic, iconic kind of images that people would have of what vets are, what PTSD vets are. But there was no personal connection. And I feel as if people didn't really understand it. And the goal here was to understand it, to personalize it, to humanize it. So that's what we tried to do in this. And as Julie said, there were so many stories that were so powerful. It was heartbreaking to see it.
Yeah. I want to touch on some of those, but before we do, can you share with our listeners what's involved with service dogs and veterans? I know in the film you talk about a lot of the VA in general, well, let's say this, and correct me if I'm wrong, recommends service dogs, but they don't pay for it, and it's super expensive. Right. And correct me if I'm wrong here again, service dogs as a modality is not recognized as an evidence-based treatment.
Right.
Not yet.
Okay, which is really interesting. And so talk a little bit about service dogs and its place in the treatment process, how they get them, et cetera.
Well, you mean vis-a-vis the VA or just in general?
Well, vis-a-vis the VA. Let's start there.
Well, the most important part of it to understand is that, as you said, many people in the VAs across the country will recommend a service dog, and they see the value of the service dog for dogs. And they will, in fact, pay for it with veterans who have a physical disability like deafness or blindness, or if they're paralyzed. The VA will pay for it. What they won't pay for is, and they don't acknowledge, is the efficacy and usefulness of a service dog for veterans with invisible injuries, i.e., PTSD.
Okay.
Traumatic brain injury or moral injury. They'll pay for veterinary care. They'll pay for certain parts of it, but they won't pay the $25,000 or $30,000 for the dog itself. And there's been attempts since 2011 to enact a law that's generically called the PAWS Act. But it keeps hitting roadblocks through Congress, and the roadblocks are through veterans committees that are influenced by the VA. We've found. I'm getting into touchy political arena here, but it seems as if the VA has resisted it, and they have been mandated to do a longitudinal study to figure out the efficacy of service dogs for vets with PTSD. But they keep botching the studies. Many people have described it as botching the studies, and they've had to start over again a number of times. They supposedly they've finished the study, and they will finish and announce the results by spring of this year. And we have fingers crossed that they will begin to mandate that they pay for the dogs. It's a huge problem and challenge, though, because of so many vets that could benefit from it, probably a limited number of dogs and dog trainers out there, and how to manage the money, because they're $25,000 to $30,000 a dog. So it's a big management problem, and the VA is famously not well run and underfunded. So
we recently went to Washington, D.C., and showed the film to Congress and lobbied congressmen and women for the PAWS Act, which was an extraordinary event for us.
Both of you?
Yes, we went.
Us,
oh, wow.
Veterans, with some of the veterans from the film. And it was an amazing couple of days to walk through those halls and to try and make a difference to get the VA to be able to pay for these dogs for veterans. I mean, that would be incredible. It's just taking so long.
Right.
And we're hoping that it's going to get passed. I mean, we got more people to sponsor the bill, or to be co-sponsors, right, Josh? How many people now? Do you remember?
The last I heard from one of our contacts that we worked with, when we went in, there were 170 co-sponsors in the House, and they needed like 290 or 300 in order to have a vote immediately in the House rather than discussion. And now it's up to 250 or 60. So, it's really, we're getting there. And it's terrific. The horror of this also is because of the way it's set up now, a lot of the dogs are paid for through donations and scholarships from foundations and wealthy individuals who care about this issue and will fund the dogs. But it's not nearly enough. So the result is that many vets who want a dog, and they get to the place in their healing process, which might be years, but this is a whole conversation we could get into if you wanted to, about the trajectory of vets who come back with PTSD. But often it's years after they return that they actually qualify to get a dog. And at that point, when they've stopped drinking, they're off drugs, they can actually get a dog. They have to wait 2 or 3 years on a waiting list. And at that moment, they're so vulnerable because they don't have the crutch of drinking, they don't have the crutch of drugs. So, keep in mind, 22 veterans a day are committing suicide. We're losing vets because they're waiting so long for dogs, right. I'm sure.
You asked about how, I think you asked about how they're trained or what the trajectory is of a veteran getting a prescription for a service dog from a healthcare provider, and then what happens? Was that part of your question?
No, but that's a good one. Let's talk about that.
They, if they go to the VA, a therapist can say a service dog might be a good thing for you. And then the veteran has to go out and find the service dog, not always pay for it, but somebody has to pay for it. Some of these organizations are funded, they live off donations. So if somebody qualifies, as Josh said, they may have to wait a long time because it takes a very long time to train a dog. Mm-hmm. If you start when they're 8 weeks old, it'll take a year and a half before the dog is really ready to be a fully functioning service animal.
But let me just interject there, Julie, if I can. But in addition to just that issue, the issue is that there's so many vets who are signing up for service dogs that they don't have enough dogs to fulfill them in a timely fashion. Right. So they're waiting in line to get a dog. It's not even a specific dog. It's just that there aren't just enough trainers. There aren't enough dogs.
Mm. One of the things that really moved me was the purpose these dogs served. A lot of times in the film, the word non-judgmental came up. Mm-hmm. The woman, I forget what her name was, who I think she was a writer and a journalist.
Sylvia.
What was her name?
Sylvia,
yeah. She said, I can just be all day in my pajamas and crying and, my dog is not going to care, not going to judge me. And the power in having this living, non-judgmental being there, providing unconditional love is just so powerful. And when you put that up against the lives, the broken lives, the painful lives that these people are experiencing, it's really a moving story and very powerful reality that's happening. I mean, again, I didn't know, what I was going to see, quite frankly. I didn't know how good the film was going to be, quite frankly, but it really blew me away. No, it really did. It. I swear to God, I was like, I'm on my couch, like my wife was watching something else, and I was watching this, and I was like tapping her. It's like, well, look at this. I was like tearing up, and these dogs were just amazing. So anyway, in short, I want to recommend that everyone watch this thing, man. To be of service. Just let me break in here. And once again, reintroduce you guys. I'm speaking with Josh Aronson and Julie Sayres, and the film is To Be of Service. It's on Netflix. This is where I saw it. Where else can people see it?
People can also get it on Amazon or on Amazon Prime. Okay. You can stream it, or you can buy a DVD from Amazon. But Amazon Prime, and Netflix are the prime areas.
Okay. One of the things I wanted to read. Is just a little blurb from the New York Times by Ken Jaworowski, who said, "The big picture is clear, and its overriding point well made. These dogs are saving the lives of those who've sacrificed so much. Every person profiled here deserves an immense amount of respect. Every animal too." I talked about how kind of heartbreaking it was to listen to these veteran stories, and that one gentleman who, again, I forget his name, who had the daughter. He talked about some of his experiences, his own kind of abuse history, and that story when he was talking about his daughter. That was hardcore. That was tough, man.
His name is Tom Flood from Billings, Montana. Yeah, he was a tough character. He was in a very, very dark place when I met him before he got his dog. Which is an interesting challenge in the film because, we start with characters like that and we hope for a longitudinal story, which means over time. And the whole idea is we meet them before they get their dog, go when they get their dog, and then follow them after they get their dog, in one case up to a year, to see how they do. Of course, we had no idea how they were going to do, so it was a roll of the dice. Yeah. And Tom, particularly when I met with him, he was in such a hard place, and his life was so difficult. I had no idea what was going to happen. It was so fast. It was 3 weeks after he got his dog. He was smiling like he had never smiled in my presence before. And he could go to the store by himself. He could pick up his daughter from school amongst all the other parents instead of hiding out across the field from them because he couldn't be near anyone. I mean, it was a total life shift within a month. Remarkable. It's just remarkable. And that was not abnormal. From a study done at Purdue University by Maggie O'Hare, who was in the film, it was clear that typically within a month, the dog made such a vast difference, it changed lives. And it's such an easy fix, if that's why we really are pressuring as much as we can to get the VA to pay for this.
Exactly. It's so remarkable that the VA won't pay for it, or that this law is not already in existence. It's not that hard. I mean, and it so clearly works. I don't think you need years and years of study to see what happens. When we first met Walter, who was the Vietnam vet, we met him in North Carolina, and he said that he had not smiled for 40 years until his dog walked into the room. That was the first time he smiled. And this was a man who had children, who had 2 marriages, never smiled. The transformation is just remarkable. And as Josh said, it's so quick. Mm-hmm. There are mornings when I wake up and maybe it's been a bad night or a bad day the day before, and my German Shepherd is sitting up looking at me with those big eyes, and I can't help but laugh. I mean, you cannot help but feel good when you look at eyes like that. So imagine...
That kind of gets me to this question here, which might seem obvious, but why do you think the dogs help so much? What was shared?
I think dogs intrinsically deeply connect with the people who care for them. They're bred over the years. They're not wolves anymore. They've evolved. They're different than wolves. And they deeply connect with us, the people who love them and care for them. And they are extremely smart. They have great instincts, and they can feel like many species of animals can when you're in trouble. And, my German Shepherds, if I'm upset, each one is different, but they respond. They know, they're present. They're alert to your feelings, to what's going on with you. They know if you're happy. They know if you're settled. They know if you're unsettled. And if you take a dog with that level of intelligence and instinct and compassion, because they have compassion, and train them to really tune in to when you're in big trouble, the results are extraordinary. And that's what we wanted to show in this.
There's a chemical part of it too that's really interesting. Someone in the film says this: when a veteran is having a flashback, or is in a rage, or is upset, or is having is showing one of his symptoms, the dogs can smell it. They can smell the chemical change. Dogs have 1,000 times more smell ability than we do. It's remarkable, the level of it. That's why, search dogs and so on can search through rubble and find people under 10 feet of concrete. That's a different story. But what the dogs are trained to do is to come right over to the vet in the midst of the rage or the flashback, put his head on your lap if you're sitting down. And the thing you do immediately is, as Julie said, you look in the eyes of the dog and you put your hand on his head and pet him. Well, when a human being looks into the eyes of a dog, it's like a mother holding a baby. And when you pet a dog, it's the same thing. And the result neurologically is a release of oxytocin. And Oxytocin, thank you. Oxytocin. And that's like dopamine. And what oxytocin suppresses adrenaline. So in the midst of a rage or a flashback, you're just dumping adrenaline. So it offsets the adrenaline. So there's a chemical part of it as well that's very, very understandable and powerful. It's real.
With there was a scene, I think, later in the film with that same gentleman, Timothy, when he's with his dog, and I think he's in a store. And,
Tom Flood?
Tom Flood, yeah. And a mom and a young kid come up to him, and the young kid is kind of like shy, and she's like, all right, Billy, what do you want to say? And he wants to pet the dog, and brings over the dog, and he says, okay, make friends. And the dog just licks this little kid, and it's such a sweet moment in this film. The thing that struck me is what I saw was these veterans wanting, coming back shattered, emotionally shattered. That one veteran had this list on his refrigerator of all these things he had done, right? Before, going to the beach, going to the store, whatever. And he rated them on a scale of, 0 to 100, 0 was
stress level.
Stress level. 0 was like no stress. 100 was like beyond stressful. And you could see these kind of simple tasks, again, going to the beach store, 90, rated. It was so crazy stressful. And it just struck me. They just want to be able to kind of lead this normal life, to feel, and it was, that to me was the way it was portrayed, was so kind of searing and profound in a way that a lot of other, whether it be books or films I've seen, haven't done. And it was so well done here.
Well, I want to give some kudos to Josh about that, especially because when we picked these veterans, we did not know how much they would reveal of their stories, because they're not stories that they talk about very often, maybe only in therapy. And Josh's compassion and gentleness and kindness when he was interviewing these veterans created a space for them to reveal the trauma that happened to them. And they were extraordinary interviews because of the way he handled them. So it was quite impressive.
How'd you do that, Josh? What did you do?
Well, it's non-doing, really. It's like a meditation. It's not doing at all. It's holding space. It's having them feel that I'm present. It's having them feel that I'm interested, and that their story is important and that they're important. And so, it's a gradual. Most of the interviews were 3 hours. The main first interviews were 3 hours long.
With your camera?
All with the camera.
Okay.
I mean, there were preliminary interviews. I would go meet them and I'd have lunch with them, or in Tom's case, I flew out to Billings and spent a day with Tom just to see if he was a potential character before showing up with a crew. And then I would fly back with the crew. But it's really getting to know them. It's earning trust. It's being at their pace, at their rhythm. And it's just, it's just what the documentary path is, with just empowering people to give you their self and to not overpower them, to let them be exactly who they are. And in the case of these vets, to make them feel that we wanted to hear their stories and to hold space for the stories. I think it's as simple as that. It's not simple to do, I must say, right, but that's what it is. And as I said before, had I not gotten to this place in my life where I'd done the work on trauma and I'd actually learned these skills, life skills, as well as interview skills, I couldn't have made the film at this level. It was just the right time for me.
Awesome. Well, there's certainly the skills of a great therapist, kind of simple to do, but simple in a sense, but not easy to do, like you said. Folks
got one interest. Oh, I'm sorry. Are we going to wrap up? Because there was an interesting thing that
go ahead. Definitely share it. Yeah.
The interesting thing that comes with doing these kinds of interviews is you're taking in other people's rage and trauma. And you take it in. As you know, as a therapist, when you're sitting one-on-one with someone for an hour or more, what comes out of them comes into you and you hold it. So the question is, what do you do with that when you've taken 3 hours of rage or 3 hours of trauma and stress into you? How do you let it out? Because what I found happening is I'd get home and I would really deal with secondary PTSD, with a kind of depression that would set in after doing days of interviews. And I had to get some help from that, from actually a meditation teacher who was an abbot at a monastery, who had been a psychiatrist before he became a meditation teacher. He gave me a lot of advice. And the one that finally worked was to really take in the stories into a part of yourself, not into your whole self, and to hold it in a compartment so it wouldn't subsume you, it wouldn't overpower you. And then at the end of the day, you have to visualize, a trap door opening, if you will, or something opening to be able to release the stories that you've held in your vault. And I used visualizations like that to do it, because otherwise you couldn't let go of it. It just would take over. I don't know if as a therapist in the trauma world, you've found techniques to handle that kind of trauma. It's like being a pediatric oncologist. I don't know how you go home with that all day, but they have to learn.
I mean, I think that's sage advice, and we talk a lot about that on this podcast here. But what you did was exactly what we talk a lot about on this podcast. And again, I want to thank you guys so much for coming on here. Your film was beyond inspiring. I'm going to do what I can to promote this. Thank you for coming on here, and congratulations on the film.
Thanks. Can I say also to just the audience, your audience, that one of the things we're looking for is it's wonderful to show the film in community, in groups. So we're talking to veterans groups and love to talk to therapist groups or trauma centers to be able to bring the film in and then bring in an audience of people, have a panel discussion with vets, with trauma people, and have the screenings, because the screenings are much more powerful than just watching it at home by yourself. To be in community, experiencing what this is happening with veteran families is just an extraordinary experience. So if this strikes a chord with anyone, our website is tobeofservicefilm.com, and there's information there about how you can do that, how you can contact us to sort of explore that kind of idea. tobeofservicefilm.com.
Awesome. And I'll have that linked up at the show notes page here at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. All right, guys. Once again, thank you so much. We'll be in touch.
Bye-bye. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.